Furina de Fontaine takes the stage once more, and today I'm here to tell you how to build her best. My name is Juice, and let's get into it. So, what artifacts does our beloved lady of the stage use? None other than 4-piece Golden Troop. This provides her with a crap ton of skill damage, and from C0 to 5, Furina puts all of her stock into her 3 little guys when it comes to damage output. The synergy is perfect here, and it's a super simple set to execute. 4-piece Mayonnaise Hunters works too. It can work for a pre-C6 Furina, as she will still lose HP and gain the crit rate buff. The main reason why Golden Troop is better is because you can get more damage out of Furina with having competent crit stats on Troop, as opposed to copping out on crit with Mayo. The 2-piece is also useless for C0 to 5. What I will say is that for C6 Furina, 4-piece Hunters is best in slot as it boosts her normal attack damage, and the majority of her damage comes from nuclear normal attacks, not just her free little guys. 2-piece mix and match sets include 2-piece skill percent, hydro percent, HP percent, and ER percent. For a C6 Furina, 2-piece normal percent and 2-piece EM are also viable. EM is for vape. Main stats are simple. From C0 to C1, go for HP percent or ER percent, HP percent, crit percent. And from C2 to C6, go for HP percent, hydro percent, crit percent. The reason you go from HP percent to hydro percent is because her C2 gives her a huge amount of HP, which covers for what the HP goblet would have given her. So then you can use a hydro goblet to hone in more on her own damage, since you have all the buffing stats needed. Substat priority is simple. Go for this. If you run a C4 to C6 Furina, then go for this. EM also becomes valuable when playing Vaporina at C6. Bursting off cooldown is very important for Lady Furina, so make sure you have the ER required. This chart applies to C0 to C3, since at C4+ you can run a minimal amount of ER and still end up being fine. You really needn't go for anything other than Troop from C0 to 5, since she nicely consolidates being a sub-DPS along with being a buffer. It yields the most value out of her kit, but Mayo still has solid value, and it is the partner set. At C6, her vape normal attacks become the majority of her damage, which is why honing in on them becomes a more successful tactic over time. An actress needs adequate props, so allow me to go over how to gear your Furina's weapons correctly. I'm gonna go over her best in slot choices for C0 to 5 in this section. Skip ahead to the C6 section if you'd like to see whale-specific choices and their benefits. So, R1 Splendor. Obviously Furina's prime best in slot choice. Holy crit stick, first of all, and second of all, it has a pretty neat passive. Her 3 little guys can deal up to 24% more damage with this, not to mention how quick it is to stack, and Furina herself can gain up to 28% more max HP. What's worth noting is that this choice heavily favors her short hair mode, since this all only triggers with HP loss mechanics. Now, Furina has 2 best in slot budget options. I'll elaborate soon. The first one that everyone knows is Festering Desire. It gives Furina pretty much everything she wants, buffs up her skill very nicely, and provides her with all that ER percent she really craves. This is a fantastic choice worth using on her if you have it. Note that if you have the C4, the ER isn't as valuable. However, Favonius is quite underrated on her. Even on my original guide, I undersold it as one of her worst picks because it didn't help her do a lot of damage. But Furina is a buffer, first and foremost. You use her for her damage second. Favonius not only gives Furina all the ER she wants, but the white particles have massive team-wide value. I have friends who own Festering and still prefer Favonius because of this. Plus, Favonius generates white particles when you crit, and usually it's used on characters like Kazuha who don't build crit. Furina does, so you get a bunch of consistent Favonius procs. There's only 2 instances where I think Favonius starts to fall off. A. You have her C2, and you want to invest more in her damage now that you have a hydro percent goblet. That's fair, but I still consider Favonius valid at this stage because she still wants energy recharge. Or B. You have C4, so that much ER is extremely redundant. You could make the white particles argument, but yes, at this stage, I also think you should just use a damaging weapon. That's enough fav chesting. TLDR, C0 to 3, use the funny white stick. And for those wondering, yes, Sacrificial works as an energy recharge stick, but because it doesn't have the white particles gimmick, I don't consider it to be as good on her as Favonius. Her absolute free-to-play choice would be the pipe. It gives her skill, crit rate, and some energy recharge to Furina as well. Pretty good Favonius substitute. The worst thing is that you need to get it from fishing, which is a fate worse than death. Harbinger of Dawn is also free to play, but I don't like it for obvious reasons. Fine crit stick outside of its dead passive though. But do know that Xian Yan is actually capable of keeping Furina at 90% HP and above, even with C2's huge HP boost, so in that niche scenario, yeah, it works. You can use Dokkan's Assistant for the HP percent main stat, and the passive of it can be triggered by Furina's A1, and you get a bit of energy from said passive as well. Very cool. Battle Pass option Wolf's Fang is a fine stat stick on Furina, but note that since the passive doesn't stack off field, you only get a chunk of it working. For what it is, that's still not terrible and works fine, but it's not insane for a paid option. As for other 5-star choices, Page AC. I like this choice a lot on Furina. Yes, the flat attack buff is useless, but the HP percent is not. Plus, you can get that on top of some nice crit rate. Very cool and consistent choice for her. I also think it's a pretty neat shade of green. Uraku Misugiri. Bet you guys weren't expecting this one to be here. 24% unconditional skill damage is no joke. Also consider that Furina works well with Navia, so it's not like you can never access the second half of the passive, but even the first half is pretty great across all comps, not to mention the splendor levels of crit damage. Uraku is just a little underrated on the whole. Wonderful 5-star Furina weapon. Key of Kaj Nisut is a solid HP percent stat stick. Like, you get a ton of HP percent from Key. The passive is solid for Vape and Dendro teams, but this one is mostly just a good alternative choice to Splendor from C0 to 5. I'll be bot-chesting it more in just a few minutes. Missplitter, while you won't get all the stacks, gives some neat damage bonus. Furina has no shortage of that herself, however, but if you're C0, it's a nice front-loaded source of damage bonus for her because her buff takes a while to ramp up. Nice crit damage too. Skyward Blade gives you energy recharge and a tiny bit of crit rate in its passive. Yep, that is the extent of its value. Other 5-star choices like Haran, Absolution, anything of that nature are just crit sticks of passives that don't specifically tailor to Furina whatsoever. These rankings are based on damage, and I mention this because while Favonius is at the bottom of the list, it is definitely amazing in terms of team utility. At C4 though, just going for damage is more worth it. I have C0 and C2 here, since C2 majorly affects her stats and build, whereas C4 is a big energy recharge stick. Now, I won't yap about literally every option again. What I wanted to do is argue for Key of Kaj Nisut's case. Furina Vape is her best in slot, highest damaging team at C6 no matter what way you look at it, and Key attunes to this perfectly. Holy EM first of all, and all that HP gets converted right into EM. You can get up to 336 EM from Key at R1 if we assume your Furina has 60k HP after C2 buffs. Insane. Despite how bad it looks on her, remember that it doesn't look good on Nilou either, so you might as well put it on the true Hydro Queen. Xingqiu. Nah, I'm just kidding. But seriously, don't sleep on Key. It generally beats Splendor at C6. The only case where I see Splendor being better is that if you have a ton of outside EM sources, like Instructors Bennett, C2 Kazuha, etc., then the massive Elemental Mastery conversion starts to fall off, and then you're just left with a bunch of HP unnecessarily. Then the crit from Splendor becomes more valuable. Here's a calc of C6 R1 Key Furina with Bennett, a regular C0 Kazuha, and a C0 Xian Yan. Here's Splendor in that same setup next to it. Now here's a calc of a C6 R1 Key Furina with Instructors Bennett, C2 Kazuha, and a C0 Xian Yun, and here's Splendor in that same setup. I was having discussions on my Discord relating to this lovely person who was getting more damage on their C6 with Splendor over Key, and I believe it is mostly a case of diminishing returns. Hope this helped all my C6 believers out there. So, who is worthy of standing next to your sublime actress in battle? Literally everyone apparently. Furina has 1 billion million zillion teams, so strap in as I cover them all. Her best by a technicality is Noivellette since he maxes out her fanfare the fastest. I say by a technicality because the C0 Noiv doesn't really need Furina, and because at C2+, every team in the game can max out her fanfare very easily, but at C0 to 1, Noiv synergizes the best. In fact, Noivellette Freeze is fairly underrated. Noivy, Furina, Kazuha, and Charlotte. Since Charlotte's marks work a little like Nihida's and mark enemies with Cryo, Noivy can keep foes frozen from far away and prevent them from moving. Nice stuff, give the team a try if you haven't already, it works like a charm in AoE. Furina will work in genuinely any team you put her in that features a healer, so I'm just gonna go over some of her strongest synergies, then I'll delve into specific healers that you can use for her, including 4-star budget options. Rio got saved thanks to Furina. Now he has an actually competent team thanks to her, so good job Furina, you saved him. Please listen and hear me out on this one. Linny Vape. I get it, his kit is supposed to be monopyro, but Kokomi is supposed to be on field, and how did that work out for her? Linny is a front-loaded DPS, and being able to quickly vape away bosses makes him a crazy speedrunner. I know a lot of you aren't gonna believe me just saying it, so here's a side-by-side comparison of a Linny vape clear versus his best monopyro team in the current Abyss. So yeah, Furina is insane with Linny no matter what way you steer it, and her damage bonus percent is more valuable than him fully filling out his pyro passive. She works nicely as a Navia buffer too. Navia, Chiori, or any other substitute Geo, Furina and Xian Yun makes for a fun team. Xian Yun can run Viridescent Venerer for Furina's Hydra damage, or Song of Days Past for the team's overall damage, since it affects Navia and Chiori as well, and can also enable Navia to plunge, and also solves the problem I had with Bennett, which was how his healing wasn't team-wide. But he's still a fine substitute to Xian Yun here, just won't be as comfy, but you'll get larger Navia nukes in turn. Another nice setup is Navia, Yolan or Xingqiu, Furina, and Noelle. Noelle can on-field heal while Navia's burst is up, and helps generate more crystallize while Navia's nukes are on cooldown, then Navia can come out and bust out some solid nukage. I personally prefer Yolan over Xingqiu here, since Noelle already heals and shields, and Yolan's ramping damage bonus is therefore more beneficial, not to mention the higher sub DPS. Furina's huge buffing here is wonderfully appreciated. She's also very good with Xiao, who has HP loss mechanics in his kit already. R1 Xiao, Furina, C6 Farzan, and Xian Yun is one of the strongest hypercarry teams in the game right now, and has fantastic synergy. Just make sure to build really high attack percent substats on your Xiao, because there's so much damage bonus percent here, both from Furina and Xiao's own burst scalings. Honda Boy can use this team as well, just replace Xian Yun for Jean or Bennett. If your Jean is at C4, then that's when this comp really starts to take off, though I personally prefer Xiao's team, since he's already accustomed to dealing with HP loss. Alhaitham also has a neat synergy with Furina, and is very solid for Quick Bloom. You'd use him in either a comp of Alhaitham, Furina, Kuki Shinobu, and Nihida. If you find Kuki's single unit healing to be annoying, you can also put Prototype Amber on Nihida to access Team Mud heals in the same team. There's also the Baiju variant of this comp, featuring Alhaitham, Furina, Elemental Mastery Raiden, and Baiju. While this does less damage than the Nihida variant, it sure is comfier. It also acts as my preferred Alhaitham team. Sino also really appreciates Furina because he really wants characters who can tend to his long field time duration. He has multi-wave issues, but Furina's three little guys have an insane uptime of 30 seconds a pop, and her burst lasts for 18 seconds, so Quick Blooms stay up consistently. She is the best Hydra applicator for the job, and forms Sino's best in slot team of the man himself, Furina, Nihida, and Baiju. Furina is also very nice in D-Luke and Gaming Plunge, because while they are airborne, Furina still applies Hydro. Cool stuff. This is nice because you'd otherwise have to weave in Yolan or Xingqiu procs if you want them to vape their plunges. I personally recommend either D-Luke or Gaming, Furina, Bennett, and Xian Yun. The other option is Pyro Plunge Hu Tao, who offer the strongest variant of this team. It consists of Hu Tao, Yolan, Furina, and Xian Yun. Note that you'll want to do N1 JP combos on Tao to weave in Yolan procs, and that Staff of the Scarlet Sands will be better than Staff of Homa here, since your Hu Tao will always be above 50% HP. Furina also opens up the doors to reverse Vape Klee, in which Klee applies so much darn pyro that Furina is able to get some vapes in. It's a little goofy, but it's actually not a bad team, and has a surprisingly solid output. Cool if your Klee lacks a use case currently. Ayaka also has a freeze variant with Ayaka, Furina, Kazuha, and Charlotte. I personally far prefer Ayaka's other freeze variants, especially with Kokomi, because you can run TDDS and TOTM on her and give Ayaka the attack percent she desperately needs. Damage bonus percent isn't a huge deal with Ayaka, assuming you run Mistblitter already, but this is still a very strong and competent team choice if you'd like to play Furina in freeze. Eula can also utilize Mika far better with Furina around. His healing and physical buffing makes him worth using with the Aristocrat. A team of Eula, Furina, Raiden, and Mika is sure not to disappoint, and will be one of the stronger physical variant teams that you can play. Double Hydro is also a super strong team core that you can shove anywhere and stick a driver in front. If you run Kokomi, Furina, Yelan, and Kazuha, then you're running the very comfortable team of Mono Hydro. Kokomi on fields for her team-wide healing, a team which can take full advantage of her entire kit, and is really good for abysses such as the current one where we have 2 Pyrolectors. It's not a fast clearing team per se, but it's very comfy, not to mention how Hydro Res percent buffs every damage relevant character in the team. Raiden, Yelan, Furina, and Xianyun or Jin at the end can allow for the Raiden driver variant, which has the comfort of Raiden giving everybody energy, which allows them to burst off cooldown with ease. I prefer Mono Hydro myself, but if you want to dust off your Electro Archon, then here's not a bad place to do so. I know somebody's gonna comment about it, so yes, you can play Furina in Quick Bloom teams of Clorand and Yai, Kaching, etc., but I'm not highlighting these as those teams are not as good for them. And yes, the Clorand Chi-Chi team does feature Furina in it, so there's that too. And Furina can work in Bloom, but she doesn't buff transformatives, so her damage bonus percent won't be affecting the Bloom cores. She only buffs her own damage in that team, and is mostly just a stick so you can apply more Hydro. Not hugely recommended here. Now for the healers you can use. Xianyun is the best healer in the game in my opinion. She'll be the strongest Furina healer to date as she's an off-fielding potential VV holder that restores your comp's health fast. Jean by nature of association is also strong for similar reasons, though Xianyun synergizes better with Fanfare Gain as her initial heal blast isn't as large, allowing for HP drain to start again faster. Jean's still great though and has Sunfire utilities. Baiju is the Dendro side of this, really great healer for all your Dendro needs and will mostly see use in your Alhaitham and Sino scenarios. Kokomi is fantastic in Mono Hydro and Bloom, if you do so choose to have Furina in a Bloom team despite the negative drawbacks. Really great Furina synergy. I also think Kokomi is better than Sigewinne in Mono Hydro at this stage, as despite the buff Sigewinne gives to Furina's 3 little guys, she literally can't proc Yelan, whereas Kokomi can. Situational, albeit a very solid healer if you have access to her. I will say that Sigewinne's burst has a short duration of 3 seconds, which can fit in during Yelan's burst downtime. Chi-Chi only has a single solid use case in that one niche Clorand team, otherwise I consider her fairly unviable. Avoid her. Okay, budget options time. I'm gonna start with Noelle because she's a great Furina driver. Not only is she literally free, but her heals are team-wide and you still keep her burst active when you swap on and off of her. She really came into her own when Furina released. You can alternatively use Furina to buff her own damage in a Geo team, offering you a solid free-to-play friendly Geo DPS, though her best use case will be to drive double Hydro Furina. Only gets better with Constellations too. C1 plus Charlotte is very nice as she provides pretty much all the healing that you'd need for your Furina. Yes, she's best in Freeze and Noivy Freeze, but if you haven't got access to these options, then feel free to use Charlotte in any team where you just generally need the team-wide heals. Mika's in a similar situation to Charlotte, where while he has his best in slot place in Eula comps, you can still use him as a budget option wherever you need him. He also offers some funny attack speed stuff which you can play around with. Yao Yao works in Bloom, but I've already stated why Furina Bloom kinda rubs me the wrong way. Good choice nonetheless. Bennett works fine, but he's a single character healer which I don't love, but he will suffice and will keep your necessary teammates sustained. And he will work if you're only aiming to buff one specific carry as opposed to a whole large team with various damage sources. Kuki has a similar problem where her main value lies in being an excellent Hyper Bloom trigger, not so much just her healing since it's single character. Though her heal ticks are solid enough and she will suffice just fine, also she becomes better with Constellations. I don't love Barbara in these teams, iffy cooldowns, but she is as free gets. While I think you should honestly just use Noelle if it's a pure free-to-play option you want, Barbara will be fine, sure, okay. Alright ladies and gentlemen, congratulations for enduring all of that. Now we learn Furina's mysterious ways. Her normal attacks just do 4 simple physical strikes, very basic. The best thing about them is that she rides a shiny bubble on one of them, which is pretty cool. Furina's skill does 2 things depending on the form. Her short hair form summons 3 little guys. They will hit enemies at random intervals, applying hydro and draining HP from your entire team. They will also deal more damage if they drain HP from characters that have more than 50% HP in your team, and will stop draining HP from your team if they all hit 50% HP. Her long hair form, aka the superior design, summons one big guy who heals your on-field character based on Furina's max HP. Furina can use their charged attack to quickly switch between modes, and if you switch modes, say halfway through the duration, then the second mode will last for 15 seconds as an example. It doesn't reset their duration. Also, you can walk on water with both modes, however the short hair form is more effective because they move with you. Then for her burst. She deals some AoE hydro damage and then provides your whole team with damage percent and healing bonus percent based on the amount of fanfare she has. Furina generates fanfare for every 1% of HP lost or gained during her burst, which is what the skill's HP drain mechanics are for. At level 10, this can grant you up to 75% damage bonus at C0 if you totally max out her fanfare. It's worth noting that this buff is backloaded, because it takes the whole rotation to fill out her buff, so you'll more likely end up with an average of 40 to 50% damage bonus depending on your team and healer used. It's no longer backloaded from C1 onwards, because she gives herself 150 fanfare up front and increases the cap of how much buffing she can do, with 0.25 times 400 being 100% damage bonus. So yeah, great burst. As for Ascension passives, her A1 lets Furina provide your team with a bit of healing if your on-field character overflows of heals. This is pretty nice to deal with the problem of single character healers like Kuki, but sadly since Bennett stops healing at 70% of a character's HP, he can't proc this. If you're at 69% HP, then he will still give you a large heal proc beyond 70%, but that's still not a lot of procs of this A1. Furina's A4 offers her 3 guys the chance to deal up to 28% more damage, and for her big guy to have his healing interval reduced by 16%. You'd want 40k HP to max out these buffs, which is why you aim to have such high HP on Furina. Fine A4. As for talent priorities, from C0 to 5, buffing is the main deal with Furina, so level that burst of hers right up as high as possible. I would personally max it out, as it is one of those talents worth the said resources. Then level her skill, as her damage contributions aren't half bad. Ignore her normals. As for all my dear C6 players who've been feeling a little starved by this point, so here's the thing. I've already covered Furina's entire C1 to C6 playstyle in depth, and I'm somebody who owns C6R1 and has plenty of experience, while having access to Furina's of numerous investment levels, so I'm gonna redirect anybody interested in high investment Furina playstyles to this video, which you can find either on my channel or at the end of this video, because it covers literally everything. It also goes more in depth regarding Furina's C6 synergies and playstyles. Furina is still the best character in the game, and I believe she'll continue to age wonderfully into the future. Damage bonus percent is such an excellent form of buffing, but the only way I could see her falling off is if transformatives had such a massive rise that damage bonus percent became irrelevant. If you haven't got her already, she is more than worth the pull, and if you own her and are thinking of getting cons, know that every single one is more than worth your time. Happy nuking, fellas! Hopefully this guide was able to help your Furina let the world come alive! This has been Juice, signing out. And I never understood Paimon insulting Furina's house in her story quest. That looks like a pretty solid house to me.